Vince tells Russell, plainly and without softening it, that Russell cannot come with them anymore. For a moment, Russell does not understand what his longtime childhood friend has just said. Vince adds that the reason should already be obvious, and Russell mutters that yes, he supposes he does know. The truth is, he has known for a long time. He has known in the back of his head that one day this exact conversation would land on him. The four of them have been together since they were small. Russell's black hair is uncommon in the village and tends to put the adults off, which is why they keep their distance from him. But a boy his own age and a bigger build once walked over and asked him to play. That was Vince, whose red hair matches the heat of his personality. They grew up clashing tree branches against each other every day without ever getting bored of it. And by the time they had moved on to proper wooden practice swords, Russell was winning more often than he was losing. Then Emmy joined them, marching up with a branch she had broken off a tree herself, blue eyes peeking out from between long blonde hair. And to everyone's surprise, she had a real talent for the swing of a blade. Watching from a little way off was Janet, languid eyes mostly hidden behind blue hair and a book always open on her lap. Never bored, never missing a thing. Always ready with a quiet correction or a bandage when one of them came back skinned. The four of them being together felt as natural as weather. They had promised each other they would form an adventurer party and dive into dungeons before the goddess selection ceremony came for them. The goddess selection ceremony is the rite where every person who reaches the age of 16 receives a job from the goddess, an ability bestowed personally on them. The abilities given are powerful and carry no disadvantage, and the ceremony only ever adds to the skills a person has already worked to earn. A young person can take the job they are given or set it aside in favor of one that suits their talents better. And true to the promise of the rite, the four of them all received their jobs from the goddess. Vince became the hero, Emmy the holy knight, Janet the sage, and Russell the saint. It was too much weight, those 4 titles, for 4 young people out of a rural village. As the saint, Russell was supposed to carry the responsibility of holding the party together, supporting everyone, the keystone in the arch. That was the theory. There is, the narrator reminds, no disadvantage in any of these jobs in itself. Into the conversation between Vince and Russell, who has already given up on staying, Emmy bursts in. She demands to know how Vince can even say something like that kicking Russell out of the party is just… She cannot even finish. Vince snaps back that he does not want to do it either. Then why? She asks. Vince fires back with the question of when, exactly, was the last time Emmy actually needed a healing spell from the priest. Russell deliberately downgrading his real title to the lower form just to twist the knife. Emmy chokes on the answer and clamps her mouth shut, because he is right. Russell's healing magic as the saint has, in practice, turned out to be useless. The reason is simple and cruel. Adventurer levels rise inside dungeons. The other 3 were already strong from years of mock combat, and even Janet has grown formidable on the back of all her reading. They are too strong to ever get hurt. Russell, who does not even carry a sword anymore, cannot match Vince or Emmy in melee. And although he thinks he could still earn his keep as an ordinary staff wielder in the upper levels of a dungeon, something happened before they reached the middle levels that broke his place in the formation. The hero, the holy knight, and the sage are all excellent jobs, versatile and adaptable, useful no matter what comes. And every one of them has learned the basic healing spell, heal. Russell still remembers the floor seeming to drop out from under him the day the sage, Janet, who specializes in offensive magic, was the first besides him to learn heal. From that point on, in a party where nobody got hurt, he had nothing to do. He has no offensive magic of his own. The level gap between him and the others widened by the week, and yet he still eats the same meals and takes the same share of the rewards as anyone else. Vince presses Emmy further. He reminds her that earlier today, she had to step in to protect Russell and was in some danger doing it, and that if she keeps Russell along on these trips, she is going to die for him at some point. He adds, casually, that he does not think Russell can even beat Emmy in a fight anymore, that Russell would probably get hurt just bumping into her. Russell has held his tongue through the rest of it, but he cannot let that one pass. He still has some pride left from beating both of them in their childhood mock duels. He tells Vince this is not an adult against a child, and there is no way he would get hurt that easily. Vince invites him to prove it, telling him that if he loses, he should give up everything and go back to the village, since the life of an adventurer clearly does not suit him. Russell tells him fine, let us do it. Vince turns to Janet for confirmation, and Janet, who has not spoken until now, says quietly that yes, there is no way Russell would be hurt just by colliding with her. And if he were that fragile, then he should not be in the party either. Russell registers the verdict without any visible reaction. Her face shows him nothing about whether she is annoyed or simply worried. He picks up a wooden sword from where it leans by the wall, the kind only Vince and Emmy use these days, and turns to face Emmy. She is still off balance from the whole argument, and she lifts her shield in her left hand, which is not her dominant arm. He tells her to hold the shield up properly because he is not going to miss. She agrees, but asks him not to push himself too hard. He knows she means it kindly. He also feels it land like condescension, like he is being looked at from above. He calls out that here he comes, and before she can answer, he takes a long step forward and brings the wooden sword down in a two-handed overhead strike, his full weight and the weight of the wood behind it, the kind of blow that would stagger a normal girl, even with a shield braced in both hands. Emmy's face comes in close. Their eyes meet. He sees the light flare up off her shield and registers oddly in the same instant that it has been a long time since he has seen her this close, and that the little brat he grew up with has grown up. Night has fallen by the time Russell wakes. He looks around the room by moonlight from the window and finds the in-room they had all been sharing is empty. He wonders for a moment if he has been asleep the whole day, then corrects himself. He has been knocked out. Beside him on the bed are a single travel bag and a small pouch of gold coins, enough to live on for a while. Everything else is gone. The wooden sword, the loot from their last dungeon, and his 3 childhood friends. Only now does it really land on him that he has been expelled from the party. In the end, he spends the rest of the night alone in the empty inn-room, and greets the next morning's clean sky with a mind still clouded over. He plays the previous day back. Vince's line about giving up everything and going home if he got hurt has turned out to be the literal outcome. Emmy had only her shield, no weapon, no counterattack, and he went at her swinging, and she most likely activated some skill that blew him flat. After he passed out, they simply left, because he passed out. He thinks about Emmy and cannot decide what face he is supposed to wear if he ever sees her again. She is too kind a person to know what to say to him. He decides that what happened, happened. He had a feeling this was coming sooner or later. Today it came. He leaves the inn and walks through crowded streets. He touches his chest over the white robe that has never quite felt like his own. The party tag he made when they first registered together is not there anymore. He cannot use it now anyway. On his way toward the south gate, he passes the church, the same one where their goddess selection ceremony was held. He can still hear the priest's astonished voice from that day, exclaiming what a tremendous gift had just been bestowed, marveling that there was even a saint among them, and calling it a truly blessed occasion. The previous saint had been active 20 years before Russell's time, and was famous in her own right, and once upon a time, Russell had been a little proud of having been called to the same job as her. Once upon a time. He thinks about going inside the church one last time, but then he looks up at the stained glass image of the goddess set above the door, and walks on in silence. The window shows the goddess, blonde hair, pure white chitin, indistinct in the way stained glass forces a figure to be, who becomes a wash of colored light inside the chapel when the sun hits her. He wonders what kind of being she actually is. He wonders why she handed him the saint job when he had spent his life with a sword in his hand. He wonders whether, if Emmy had spent that one childhood afternoon reading with Janet, instead of pulling a branch off a tree, their jobs would have come out swapped. He concludes that he knows nothing about her, that she would not answer him even if he asked, and that he has no interest in asking the colored panes in any case. The church stands where it has always stood, the goddess looking out from the glass, unchanged. But one thing in him has changed. He has come to hate her. He picks up the basic supplies for a light trip and heads through the south gate toward his hometown. He used to take this road full of hope. Those days are far behind him now, and the truth is, he has never been back home since the day he left for the city. After walking a while, he finds a small child crouched at the side of the road. He recognizes her, or thinks he does. She is the daughter of the family that owns the bean field back in the village. 4 years old or thereabouts. Much too young to be alone out here. He calls out gently to her and asks what is wrong. The girl looks up at him with tears already standing in her eyes, between hiccups that break apart any answer she tries to give. He asks again, "What happened?" She says, between sobs, that her mom is sick, and then she starts crying again before she can finish. He sits with her until she calms, and she lowers her face shyly and apologizes for crying out of nowhere. He tells her not to worry about it and asks her properly what happened. Slowly, she tells him. Her mother is ill, and she slipped out of the village alone to look for help. He mentally notes that he is going to have a word with the gate guard later. He asks where her father is, and she says quietly that she does not have one. The illness has no clear cause. The family has only the two of them, and they do not have the money to bring a priest out. He gets it then. She walked out without any real plan, just looking for anyone she could find. He tells her that he is actually from Adria village himself, and assumes she must be too, and proposes that they go back together so he can take a look at her mother. She blinks in surprise, and asks if he can cure her mother's disease. He says he does not know, but he can at least try a basic healing spell, which is better than nothing. The girl admits, very small, that they cannot pay him. He tells her that it is impressive she even understands money already, and tells her not to worry, that he is not going to ask for what they do not have, and that a little girl like her should not be carrying that kind of worry in the first place. Hiring a priest costs money. Treatment for free does not happen normally. He thinks, with a complicated weight, that it is strange for him in particular to be saying that, given the last few days, but he is not the sort of person who can walk past someone from his own village and leave them to die on his way back to the orphanage. Besides, he reasons, he barely uses his saint magic anymore, and is starting to worry his skills will rust if he never uses them. With that decided, he sets off toward the village with the girl walking beside him. Her name, he learns, is Brenda. He has seen her around a few times, but has never actually spoken to her until now. Brenda asks him why he is going to the village. He answers vaguely that it has been a long time since he has been home, and he thought he would show his face. She accepts that. The conversation falls into a small silence. The truth, he reminds himself, is that what he is about to try is just an ordinary level of healing magic. If it works, good. If it does not, well, that is that. He is privately impressed that this small girl walked as far as she did. He asks if she had been planning to go all the way to the city. She says brightly that she had. He asks what she would have done when she got there, and she admits in a smaller voice that she was going to find someone who could help. As he thought, she had not really planned past that, but since she had run into him along the way, he supposes it counts as a successful trip on her part. Whether running into him in particular, who could not even hold his own in his last party, is a stroke of luck for her mother, is another question. When Brenda realizes he is not interested in keeping the conversation going, she falls silent too, and walks along at his side. He has not come back to the village in a long time, mostly because it is just not an easy walk from the city. He left at dawn, but with the side detour of meeting Brenda, the sun is already setting by the time they reach the gate. There is a commotion at the gate. An argument of some kind. Someone is saying that the missing child is not at this place either, that they cannot find her anywhere, that it is getting dark and this is bad. Then one of them spots him and breaks off mid-sentence, calling out his name in surprise, and realizing in the same breath that Brenda is right beside him. He corrects them. He did not so much find her as run into her near the city, which is the more important point. And as he says it, he steps over to the gatekeeper and raps him sharply on the head. He reminds the dazed man, while the man holds his head and winces, that the village has high fences, the gates are closed at night, there is an alarm system, and the gatekeeper sleeps in the hut right by the gate, and that for Brenda to have walked out unnoticed despite all of that requires a remarkable degree of carelessness. The man groans an apology. It turns out that during a shift change, the substitute had decided to goof off instead of going straight to his post, which is the kind of thing that erupts into shouting after the fact. Russell shakes his head, tells them he has urgent business and is leaving now, and warns them to actually close the gate next time. It is not the homecoming he might have imagined, but no one was going to throw a parade for him anyway. He takes Brenda's hand and hurries toward her sick mother. By the time the sky has gone from bruised crimson to deep blue, they reach Brenda's house. Brenda calls out that she is home. Her mother is, in fact, standing in the doorway between coughs, not lying in bed at all, demanding through the coughs to know where Brenda has been. For a woman as sick as her daughter described, she is on her feet, and Russell can only assume the worry over her missing child has dragged her upright. He cuts straight to it, telling her that he can see for himself she is in bad shape. She looks at him a moment and recognizes him as one of the children from the orphanage, one of the ones who always played with Vince. He corrects her, says his name is Russell. He is mildly surprised she knows the names of orphanage children at all. She has the broad social circle of someone who is reachable, the opposite of him. Her physical condition is what worries him now. She looks like she could collapse where she stands. He tells her to lie back down in her room and that he will try a healing spell, although he cannot promise it will work. She protests, between coughs, that they have no money for treatment, calling him Russell with a polite affection. He tells her he does not mind if she does not pay, and that if she really wants to pay him, she can do it later when she has it. That it is not as if this is some high-level magic and he does not even know if it will work. He persuades her to lie down. She must have been pushing herself harder than she realized, because as soon as she is flat on the bed, she breaks into a sweat. Her color goes paper white and her breathing turns thin. He tells her flatly that she is in serious shape, that she had no business standing up at all, that even if Brenda had managed to drag a priest all the way out from the city, it would not have mattered if she had collapsed first. She gasps between breaths that she could not find Brenda anywhere. He just sighs. Brenda, between sobs, tells her mother she is sorry. She is really sorry. He cuts the moment short by saying, "Let us just try it and see," and casts Cure. Cure is a simple anti-poison spell. He has been able to use it since level 2. He notes, with a small unpleasant flicker, that it is also the spell the sage, Janet, learned after she had mastered Heal. The effect on Brenda's mother is, to his surprise, immediate and dramatic. She sits up almost on her own, then experimentally moves her arms and legs as if testing whether her body really belongs to her again. She breathes out that she is healed. He tells her, mildly bewildered, that he had thought she was seriously ill, but apparently it was a simple poison that a basic level spell could clear. She starts to say that should not be possible, but Brenda lets out a long wail of relief and throws herself at her mother, knocking them both flat back onto the bed. The mother holds her daughter close and whispers through tears that she is sorry. She is sorry. Russell tells Brenda gently that her mother has not fully recovered yet and to go easy on her. Brenda apologizes again, and her mother turns to Russell, calling him by name once more, telling him that she does not know how to thank him. He tells her it was really just a basic spell, that she does not need to, but that if she truly wants to thank him, she can cook him a small meal, and that will do. She promises she can manage that much right away. Healing magic and cure, the two spells that never had a chance to matter in a party that did not need them, sit differently in him now. He thinks to himself that what happened was not his fault or theirs, only that the chemistry between him and them was bad. His tattered heart settles a little, watching Brenda smile. He thinks, tentatively, that maybe spending his days as a village healer would not be such a bad fate. Brenda's mother, now recovered and visibly more energetic, prepares a dish from some dried meat a neighbor had brought by. That, she explains, is how she had managed to feed herself at all through being ill. She remarks that his healing magic was remarkable, and asks whether he received some kind of special job at the selection ceremony. He realizes the news of the village uproar over their results never reached this far out. He tells her, casual and a little flat, that he is just a run-of-the-mill healer mage, different from Vince, the boy he used to spar with constantly, who got the hero job at the same ceremony. His job, he says, is a support type. She accepts the answer. He tells her not to mind it, that a priest is not needed if no one gets hurt, and that not needing him is a good sign. He is not saying it to be contradicted. He is saying it to nail down for himself, again, that compared to the hero, his job is plain. Vince has always been the main character, he thinks, which is how an old widow this far from the village center can still know his name. The mother then muses aloud that she still does not understand how she even caught this illness. Russell asks back, casually, whether she has any idea what might have caused it, expecting no real answer. The answer she gives him stops time. His pulse, which had just begun to settle, spikes again. He thinks bitterly that if this too is one of the fates the goddess has arranged, then the goddess is a very nasty being. The mother tells him a dungeon has appeared near the village, that she went to take a look, that she was injured by one of the monsters, and that her health began to fall apart after that. Russell registers it all in silence. He was kicked out of the party he had grown up in because he could not pull his weight in a dungeon. And now he has come home for the first time in years and found a brand new dungeon waiting for him at the door. A peaceful, rural village far from any city. And now a dungeon? He wonders what sort of joke this is supposed to be. The mother notices his expression and asks what is wrong. He shakes it off and says it is nothing. The villagers have no idea he was thrown out of his old party for being useless in dungeons, so he papers over it with a cover story and lets the conversation end there. He tells her he will be heading to the orphanage now, that he had been planning to go there first, but had come here because of what Brenda told him. The mother apologizes for the trouble. He waves it off and thanks her for the meal. Both mother and daughter walk him to the door. Brenda asks, hopeful, whether they will meet again. He tells her, maybe, that he is thinking of staying in the village, but is not entirely sure. Brenda insists he should stay. He pats her head lightly, smiles to reassure her, and lets go of her hand. He cannot exactly run off to another village just because a dungeon has opened near this one, and besides, he cannot really picture himself living anywhere but here. The city is not an option either. He sets off toward the orphanage where he was raised. The day is getting dark, but there should still be some children playing outside. Only there are none. The street is strangely empty, although it is not even quite dark. He turns it over in his head as he walks. A dungeon. Just when he had decided to take a break from them. By the time he reaches the orphanage, the sun has fully set. The dark falls fast once it starts. He knocks once on the door and walks in without waiting for an answer. A familiar voice scolds him for not waiting for a reply. He tells her not to be so hard on him. The voice stops short, then exclaims his name in disbelief. Russell calls back that he is home, addressing the older woman as Auntie Gemma. Gemma, one of the two women who run the orphanage, is visibly startled to see him. She is a brisk, warm old woman who looks after all the children here. She tells him he could at least have given some warning, that Frederica is out, that she has nothing prepared to eat, and asks about Vince and the others. Russell tells her he has already eaten and that he has come back alone. Gemma looks at him a moment and remarks that his atmosphere seems to have changed. He admits vaguely that it has. He dodges the rest of the question, but Gemma is sharp and can tell something has shifted. He thinks to himself that there was no goodbye, that he cannot exactly put on a cheerful face. He changes the subject and asks why the orphanage is so quiet, why he saw no children in the streets even before dark. Gemma tells him monsters have been appearing at night. He repeats it back to her. Monsters. Inside the village? Yes, she says. Monsters, which is a real problem. According to her, bat-like creatures have been spotted in the sky over the village, and some children have already been attacked. He has heard nothing about this in the city. He asks when it started and what they look like. She tells him about half a month ago, around when the dungeon appeared. She got a look at one up close. Red, fairly large, the wingspan roughly her own body length. Russell names it for her. A dungeon scarlet bat. It is a dungeon-dwelling monster, the sort that rarely strays outside. Not strong exactly, but tricky to put down unless one is experienced. He thinks he can probably handle a few of them on his own. Then Gemma asks the question he has been avoiding. Why is he back alone? He sighs and tells her he supposes she of all people deserves to hear it. That it will be a long story. He recounts the events of the previous day in full, including everything that built up to them. Gemma listens without interruption, without questions, which lets him finish faster than he expected. He tells her that is why he came back today. She lets out a long breath and remarks that she cannot believe the four of them, who had been the pride of the village, have ended up like this. She tells him you really never know what fate has waiting for you. Then she puts a hand on his shoulder. She tells him she understands now why he has changed. She also tells him that the fact that he came back to the village and did not collapse into depression after all of that is on its own enough to make her happy. She pats his shoulder, and her hand sits there with a reach that feels a little shorter than he remembers. Gemma, he realizes, has gotten smaller. Then she adds, half to herself, that she had actually been worried Vince might do something like this. Russell stops. He asks her what she means by worried about Vince. She tells him he might not realize because he is such an innocent boy, but Vince has always been the sort with an eye for women. He cannot help making a startled, flat noise at how suddenly the conversation has turned. She tells him, in just so many words, that Vince was constantly looking at Emmy and Janet and Frederica too, and not at their faces. Russell is silent. She tells him that he, by contrast, would always look away when girls were almost in his line of sight, and that women notice these things. Frederica, she says, always liked him because she thought he was sweet, and was always wary of Vince because he was a grown man's appetite in a child's body. The women of the village shared that opinion of Vince, more or less universally. Russell takes that in. He had thought he knew Vince. Apparently, that part of him had stayed out of view. He says it cannot really be the reason Vince kicked him out of the party. Gemma replies that she wishes it were not, but warns him that men and women see this kind of thing differently, and he would do well to keep it in mind. Also, she adds, Emmy turned Vince down once when he had made a pass at her. In the past. Russell says this is the first he has heard of any of it. Gemma tells him this was back when they were all still children, and notes pointedly that Vince made a pass at Janet the very next day after Emmy turned him down, the walls of the orphanage being thinner than the children realized. Russell tells her, with feeling, that he does not particularly want to know that last part. He understands now, though, that Gemma has been quietly watching all of them all this time and has a better picture than he ever realized. To make a move on Janet a single day after being rejected by Emmy is, even by Vince's standards, fast. Russell cannot imagine doing it. That, he thinks, would mean that the real reason Vince kicked him out was that Vince thought he was in the way of getting closer to Emmy and Janet. The moment Gemma lays it out, everything from the night before snaps into place. The unnatural way the three of them had simply left him at the inn. He had been too shocked at the time to think it odd that even Janet had not stayed back. But in hindsight, it is glaring. It is only one of several possibilities, but it is also the obvious one. He is appalled at his own slowness. Gemma adds that on top of that, when they had set out from the village, Russell had been the one with the most wins in their childhood mock duels, and that Vince has always been the kind of boy who throws tantrums when he is not the best at something. Russell says he has never heard this either. Of course not, she says, because the side of Vince that swaggers and acts above other boys only comes out around boys he can beat. He could not act like that around Russell, who outclassed him with a sword, because Emmy and Janet would only have liked him less for it. Russell sees now. He was the lid on that part of Vince. Vince had vented his ego on everyone except him. Even with all of this, Russell thinks, he is not sure he could have been much use staying. Even leaving the whole social mess aside, he would have had to leave the party sooner or later. Gemma notes that he does not know how Emmy and Janet really felt, but the fact that neither of them stayed behind means they probably sided with Vince in the end. Russell agrees in a quiet voice that, yes, neither stayed back to say anything, and neither waited for him to wake up. He cannot quite bring himself to call it a betrayal, but he is starting to resent his own naivety. Gemma tells him not to be too hard on himself, reminding him that he is a saint, that ordinary sisters like her and Frederica should by rights be kneeling on the ground to receive his blessing. Russell tells her firmly to stop, that just imagining the strict Gemma kneeling in front of him like a servant sends a chill down his back. He knows she is making a joke, but there is truth under it. He has not fallen so far as to enjoy seeing the people who raised him grovel for his sake. Thanks to her, though, he feels noticeably better. It is her way of cheering him up. He thinks again that the woman who acted as his parent through his childhood is still ahead of him in every way that counts. A shout breaks the quiet from outside the orphanage. Someone cursing a beast and demanding that it let go. A heavy thud follows, something striking the wall. Russell tells Gemma to stay behind him and steps toward the door in a fighting stance. Gemma calls out that there is a weapon they keep for moments like this and points him to it. Russell sees a longsword hanging on the wall, mounted just above a child's reach, presumably there to scare anyone who might break in. He takes it down and tests its weight. Not bad. It is the first time he has held a sword properly in a long while, and the first time he will swing one outside of practice. He thinks, fleetingly, that he never even asked himself why he had stuck to a staff just because he was a healer. The answer, he realizes, is that the robe and the staff had both been Vince's recommendations. He sees it now. After hearing what Gemma told him, the picture is clear. Vince wanted him hanging back at the rear, off the front line, where he could not show Vince up as a swordsman. He sets the thought aside. There is no time for it. He readies himself, opens the door, and steps out with the sword up. Outside, a woman shouts at the beast, calling it a shitty creature, and then demands, when she sees him, to know who he is. Russell tells her shortly to save the talking, that this is an orphanage and to get inside. He swings at the dungeon's scarlet bat in front of him, the monster he had expected. It looks already worked over, though, with multiple fresh wounds, and seems to be barely on its feet. If the woman managed that on her own, she is more skilled than her appearance suggests. The bat shrieks at him, and he slashes through the base of its arm and follows through into its belly on the retraction. It manages to claw his cheek in return, but it is a shallow cut. The bat drops. He closes the door behind him. With those wounds, the creature will weaken and bleed out on its own. He catches his breath and gets his first proper look at the woman they have just taken in. She is beautiful. Short silver hair that falls loosely down, scarlet eyes that do not flinch. She does not look like she belongs anywhere near here. With Vince around, he thinks, it would be impossible for a woman like this to have gone unnoticed in town. The woman is staring at him with a half-stunned expression. He tells her, briefly, that the bat will not be getting up and that they are safe now, but she goes on staring without changing her expression. He asks dryly whether there is something on his face. She walks toward him unsteadily, eyes fevered, and the closer she gets, the more he is struck by how beautiful she really is. Scarlet eyes that seem to pull at him. He thinks, sourly, that it is one day after the two girls he grew up with were lured away from him by his best friend, and now here in front of him is the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. Just when he had given up on the goddess, a fateful encounter happens to land on him. He wonders what this encounter is going to bring him. Then she asks him, in a low, intent voice, whether he believes in the goddess. He thinks, internally, that this is exactly the opening line cult recruiters use. The narrator pulls back briefly to a memory of the city. A group of people dressed head to toe in red had been working a street corner, opening with the same line, asking passers-by whether they believed in God. Janet, face hidden under her triangular sorcerer's hat, had quietly stepped forward and tugged Vince away from the front of the group with unusual force for someone so reserved. Emmy and Russell hurried to keep up. Janet had then explained that the group was a new sect that had branched off from the goddess religion into a more conspiratorial doctrine. She warned them that if they answered carelessly, the cult would start telling them that the goddess knows what lies ahead, and that the cult's doctrine alone unravels the truth, and would press them to join. Russell had asked what happens to people who joined. Janet replied that once a new member is in the Red Salvation Society, as they call themselves, they are told that the goddess only grants salvation to those who are faithful and reach the upper ranks. Russell had asked, dryly, whether the upper ranks involved some kind of catch. Janet confirmed, calmly, that the membership fee was 30 silver coins a month, with an additional silver coin per rank for promotions, and pointed out that the amount was clearly designed to ruin anyone who joined. They had all walked away from that pitch grateful to Janet. Back in the present, Russell looks again at the beautiful woman in front of him. He thinks bitterly, what a day. He had finally believed he was meeting someone new, and it has turned out to be a cult member. He assumes she has milked her looks for a fortune. She is still waiting on his answer with expectant eyes. He decides he is not going to play her script the way she wants. He will give her an answer she does not expect. He tells her firmly and clearly that he hates the goddess. Her eyes go wide in surprise. Before she can say anything else, he walks past her into the deeper rooms of the orphanage. He catches the look on Gemma's face on the way and sees she wants to say something, but once he has told Gemma what just happened, she lets it go. He thinks afterward that Gemma is, of course, a sister of the goddess's church, and that whatever this woman does next is Gemma's call to make, not his. He is too tired to care anyway. He has walked all day, dealt with an unfamiliar child, and cast magic for the first time in months. He slips into an empty room, careful not to wake the children sleeping deeper in the building, and as the entire day catches up with him at once, he is asleep almost the moment he lies down. In his sleep, he sees the 3 of his childhood friends. The 3 of them are walking in a line, side by side. No, he corrects himself. 4 of them. There is another girl with them, a very beautiful woman he does not recognize, looking around as if searching for something. Her eyes meet his, where he is walking behind them, and she looks straight through him. Eventually, she stops searching and falls into step beside Vince. When he wakes, he thinks dryly that it was a strange dream, but it is none of his business whether Vince picks up 3 women or 4. He walks out of the room and heads to the dining hall. Everyone is probably already up at this hour. As he steps through the doorway and hears meat sizzling in a pan, a voice greets him. The woman from the previous night is sitting at the table, completely at ease, petting the head of one of the children, and she greets him by name, calling him Russell, with a casual good morning. He says flatly that she has made herself awfully comfortable. She tells him it is not really his concern what she is doing here, and adds that she is rather fond of children. She waves her fork and crosses her legs in an imperious manner, still patting the boy's head, and the look annoys him because it suits her. Whatever the situation is, he wonders if Gemma knows who she really is. He decides that since the moment has arrived, he will simply say what he is thinking and clear the air. He tells her she is one of the Red Salvation Society, isn't she? The woman lifts her eyebrows and asks sharply what he is talking about, demanding to know which part of her made him think she was one of those red fanatics. She spreads her arms wide, as if to put her whole self on display. She is wearing black clothes with a stylish leather jacket on top. Her long crossed legs are bare, and the strip of skin between her black knee-high socks and her shorts is almost luminously pale. He sees it then. He had been so focused on the line about the goddess that he had forgotten the most obvious thing about the Red Salvation Society, which is that they wear red, and this woman is wearing none of it. He apologizes briefly. She accepts the apology and tells him that since he can at least say sorry, she does not think he is a bad person, and that she will forgive him. She adds that she heard from the old lady that he just came back from the city, so she understands why he reacted that way, and that yes, the Red Salvation people are annoyingly persistent. He observes that she clearly understands the situation, and that if so, she must be someone who came from the city too. Then why, he asks, did she open with that question? She answers indifferently that she only wanted to know what he thought about it, and that it is hardly a strange question. He thinks that no, you do not normally ask a complete stranger a question like that. Before he can say so, she stands up and tells him, more importantly, to sit down. She walks over to the kitchen and starts cooking the meat as if it is the most natural thing in the world. He asks whether she is going to cook. She tells him her name is Sibylla. He blinks. She tells him it is not you. The realization arrives a beat late. He has not asked her name yet, and now that he knows she is not a cultist, she would obviously dislike being addressed as you. He says, "All right, Sibylla." She nods, satisfied, and sprinkles salt on the meat. He asks whether the orphanage always has this much meat on hand. She tells him there is plenty more outside, that she collected and processed yesterday's bats. He realizes she means the scarlet bat. She confirms it and tells him she also asked Gemma, who has stepped out on errands, to do something for her in exchange for her helping around here. She lays out 2 plates and sets one in front of him with a cheerful instruction to eat up. She sits opposite him and begins to eat in silence. He realizes she fed the children first and waited for him before eating herself. Before he can put the thought into words, she beats him with a question of her own, asking what his plans are for the day. He tells her he is thinking of going to check out the dungeon for a bit. He does not have fond memories of dungeons, but he cannot exactly sit on his hands while a new one is hurting villagers. It will be him alone this time, and he will have to rely on his own strength. Sibylla tells him, lightly, that in that case, she will go with him. He is now standing in the village's modest guild building. The information stored here is no different from what one finds in the city guild, because the data is shared from a central database in the capital by magic. He looks at the word solo on his profile, which marks plainly that he has left his old party and now has no affiliation. And just then, the profile of a woman appears beside his from the other side of the counter. Sibylla has followed him along, as if it was understood from the start that he would not refuse her. And frankly, he does not intend to refuse her, but he cannot understand why she is so determined to come with him. His best guess is that she found his line about hating the goddess interesting, but she has already said that was not a cult recruitment line, so why she asked it at all is still beyond him. The receptionist remarks that Russell is level 5 and a saint, asking the obvious question of whether he is not just a priest, but the goddess's saint. He confirms it. His remarks the previous night, plus the job displayed here, together speak for themselves. And to a devout believer, his words about the goddess would have sounded outright blasphemous. If she were a true believer, she would already be turning him in. Instead, Sibylla grins at him like a cat and tells him he is a pretty interesting fellow and that she likes it. He does not understand how she gets there. Maybe she is a non-believer herself. He also reminds himself, internally, that the villagers do not have a high opinion of him to begin with because of his black hair, and that being congratulated for receiving a high-level job had not made everyone like him personally. On top of that, he has shown up today with this beautiful woman in tow, and the receptionist's distinctly displeased clicking of his tongue is audible from across the desk. Russell thinks the receptionist would react very differently if he knew this woman likes the second half of the saint who hates the goddess label, not the first half. Sibylla informs the receptionist that she is also going to party up with Russell. Please process that as well. The man stammers his assent. Russell takes the opportunity to peek at her status. Sibylla is a mage at level 8, a magic type then, and a level above his. Sibylla tells him they can hash out the details later, but that they should formalize the party for now. Russell says that is fine, but reminds her she will need to handle her own food and supplies. She tells him, with mock offense, that she is not that broke. Russell asks her about a party name. Sibylla announces immediately that she already has one. Their party will be called Twilight Pact. She puts her hands on her hips and puffs out her chest with a smug look. He asks whether there is any meaning behind it. She tells him there is none, that it just sounds dark and cool. He notes dryly, internally, that this is entirely on brand for her, and he does not even have time to be amazed. He tells her, dry, that it is not a bad name. She crows agreement and crosses her arms, satisfied. Twilight Pact, he thinks. She insists he should be the leader, and that she will leave the commanding to him. He points out that, yes, he was the one who wanted to go to the dungeon, but is she really fine with him as leader? She tells him that no matter how big the level gap is, she is not bold enough to put herself above someone with the Saint job. And besides, he asks, besides what? She tells him she forgot what she was going to say. He finds her moodiness exhausting just to listen to. He had thought he would be on edge around such a beautiful girl, but the ease of her clothes matches the ease of her personality, and her gear has nothing to do with the mage stereotype. A level 8 mage in trousers with a sword at her hip. He finds it an excellent choice. She tells him she has decided their next stop. He asks whether they are not going to the dungeon. She tells him no, the next place they should go is, and they end up at the north gate of the village. There is a weapon shop here serving the gatekeepers, hired escorts, and travelers. The owner, an older woman, looks up at the door and brightens, calling Russell by name, and remarking that the rumors of his return last night were true. He greets her politely. She is one of the few in the village who never went out of her way to avoid him. He walks inside and starts browsing in silence. The shopkeeper drifts over and remarks that she had always expected him to come in to buy his first proper weapon, together with Vince and Emmy when they were old enough, that she had not expected him to become a saint. She adds that those two did come to buy weapons here, as she had thought, but it had been a shame the third of them was not with them at the time. Russell sets a light sword on the counter and tells her, with a faint smile, that he will buy this one for the sake of that lost time. She asks, even though you are a saint? He confirms, even though he is a saint, and explains that Sibylla, his new companion, is a mage, but wears practical clothes and carries a sword at her hip too. The shopkeeper looks Sibylla over and remarks on what a beautiful girl he has brought along. Sibylla tells the shopkeeper she has good eyes and to please praise her more. Russell warns the shopkeeper, dry, not to praise her like that Sibylla will get carried away. The shopkeeper laughs and tells Russell that as a weapon shop owner, she could not be happier to see a saint with a sword. Russell tells her that yes, he does not have to hold himself back for anyone anymore. From now on, he thinks, he is not going to restrain himself to a staff for the sake of a swordsman vanguard. Like Sibylla, he wants the freedom to pick the weapon that suits him best, regardless of his job. The gifts from the goddess are supposed to expand a person's options, not narrow them. And ironically, it was the hero party of all parties that had done the narrowing. He tells the shopkeeper that from now on, he will fight as a swordsman who can use recovery magic. The shopkeeper agrees, telling him he has spent more years as a swordsman than as a saint, and ought to make use of that. He pays for the steel sword out of what is left of his expulsion money. The thought lands hard. He will not, he decides, live out his days in idle peace as Vince and the others had assumed he would. He will use the money they had all earned together as the first stepping stone of his new career. He wonders, briefly, what the rest of them are up to right now. Sibylla asks him if something is on his mind. He says it is nothing, and tells her this time they really will head to the dungeon. She cheers and says finally! He puts the thought of his old friends down. He has Sibylla with him now, who can use long-range attacks to cover him. Today, he thinks, will be his first step as a new self. No, as his real self. Now then, time to see what kind of place this new dungeon turns out to be. The narrator now cuts to Emmy. In front of her is Russell, slumped against the wall of the inn room, completely unmoving, unconscious, blood trickling from his head. Janet is panicking, which is unusual for her, casting healing magic on him with quick, unsteady hands. Emmy watches the scene in a daze, as if it were someone else's problem. She cannot believe this is happening, and she does not want to believe it. And worst of all is the fact that more than anyone else, she is the one who put him here. The whole party has felt for a while now that Russell has not been pulling weight in dungeons. It was never his fault, and it was never about skill. Emmy had never thought of asking him to leave the party. They had all been together since childhood, and being together had felt as natural to her as anything in her life. She had been a tomboy back then, and Russell had been the one who always helped her find the things she lost or forgot. Once, she had cried until her face was red after losing something important to her, and Russell had been the one to find it and place it, with a troubled smile at her sobbing, on top of her head with a quiet, "Here." She had always thought he would go on helping her like that the four of them would always be together. Apparently, she had been the only one who thought so. Vince had asked her, casually, whether she did not think Russell was going to have a hard time keeping up with them from now on. She had answered, instinctively, that it had been getting harder for him lately, but that she would properly protect him and everyone as the Holy Knight. Vince had clarified that no, what he was saying was that it might be impossible for Russell to go into dungeons with them anymore. It had taken her a few moments to understand. Then she had asked whether he was serious. Yes, he had said. He had already told Janet the same thing. She had asked whether Janet had agreed. He had said yes. Emmy had not wanted to believe it, but it had been true that Russell had been getting into danger more and more lately. The saint had been called an amazing job, and the goddess religion in particular had placed enormous expectations on Russell, calling him the second coming of the saint of legend. They had all been watching to see how he would do in dungeons. He had never been given the chance because everyone in the party was simply too strong, which was not a bad thing on its own. Then Janet had also learned healing magic. Emmy had glanced at Russell at that moment and seen his face, which had looked as though he were watching something happen that was not supposed to be possible. And then she too had learned healing magic. If she, a warrior, a non-magic-based job, could cast healing magic the same as a healer, then what was the point of a healer at all? When Russell had realized that she too had learned it, he had put on an indescribable, painful smile, shut himself in his room, and from that day on, the conversations between them had dwindled to nothing. Emmy admits to herself that she has never cursed the excellence of her own job more than she did that day. And then today, a bull-headed monster called a blood taurus from the middle level of the dungeon had spotted that Russell's level was lower than theirs and gone for him. As the Holy Knight, Emmy is built to protect others, so she had thrown herself in to cover him. She had taken a light wound on her arm in the process. She had healed it immediately, and although it had hurt, the relief of having protected him had been more than enough for her. Vince, however, had not shared the feeling. She had assumed, at most, the situation meant they could no longer go on adventures together. Vince, it turned out, had been planning to kick Russell out entirely. And then, in the argument that followed, they had agreed to a test, in which Russell had charged at her with a sword. And now here they are. His wounds are gone after Janet's healing magic, but Vince spits down at the unconscious Russell as if looking at something contemptible, and says that settles it. They can no longer keep Russell in the party. Emmy protests that this was a mistake, that it should not count, that she had used some strange skill and had not meant for it to happen. Vince reminds her that Russell himself had been the one to push for the test, and asks, mocking, whether she is really about to try saying it is not Russell's fault for going down in one hit when he touched her. So let's team up again. Emmy is left speechless. Vince adds that in the first place, it was her fault he ended up like this. She has no words to deny that. He was right, she thinks. It was her fault that Russell was lying there like this. Vince presses her further, asking what she thinks Russell will think of her when he wakes up. She stammers. She cannot help following the thought. The first thing she feels is fear. Fear of what Russell will think of her. They had all been friends, playing together with tree branches when she could not beat any of the boys. Compared to Vince, Russell had carried a gentler, kinder air. He had also, as a boy, carried his own pride. The pride that had pushed him to get better and stronger until he was winning more matches against Vince. Now grown up, he is taller and broader. And looking at him up close, earlier she had been forced to admit he had become handsome too. And she had been the one who, with the job the goddess had given her, knocked out the boy who had worked so hard. In one hit! She thinks of what kind of person would do that to him. She already felt guilty toward him for learning healing magic. The thought that Russell might avoid her now is, somehow, scarier to her than taking a direct hit from any mid-level monster. She knows that is selfish and self-centered of her to feel. She agrees. They gather all the party's luggage. By the time Russell wakes, nothing of theirs will be left in this room but his own belongings. Vince collects Russell's adventurer tag right away. Emmy nearly cries, thinking that they will not be a party tomorrow. She wonders how they ended up like this, when they had left the village promising they would become the best party in the world. They had been such good friends. Vince leaves the room. Janet takes more silver coins from her bag, slips them into Russell's pocket, looks back at him one last time, and follows. Emmy is the last to leave. She tells the unconscious Russell that it is all right if he hates her for this, knowing as she says it that she is only saying it for her own comfort. Then, as if to flee a reply that will never come, she walks out. In the end, she has only been selfish. Vince, ahead of her in the hallway, keeps stealing glances at Janet. No, specifically at her chest. She knows Janet dresses lightly, but she wonders what Vince is even thinking, right after he has just kicked Russell out of the party. Janet has not said a word the whole time. Emmy notes that the amount of silver Janet slipped into Russell's pocket was not small. Russell and Janet used to talk about books, so Emmy thinks they must have been close in their own way, and Janet must feel bad in her own way too. For some reason, Emmy feels a hollow opening in her chest. Now that she thinks about it, Vince and Janet had always walked at the front, while she and Russell had always walked side by side at the back, even when they had nothing to say. Now there is no one beside her. Watching their backs, she realizes that of the three of them, Russell had filled the largest space in her heart. She has not changed from her childhood, she thinks, still only realizing the importance of something after it is gone. The kind boy who used to help her every time she cried over something she had lost is no longer going to be there for her. The next day, after the party finds new lodging, they go to the guild and notify it that Russell has been removed from their party, returning his tag. Even that much makes her chest ache. They finish their errands, eat lunch, and walk through town in a daze. All she can think about is what they will do if they run into Russell by accident. How unbearable that would be. Before she realizes it, they have passed the very church where they received their jobs from the goddess. They glance through the doorway out of habit and spot a woman with gorgeous blonde hair standing inside. Her hair seems to catch the light from the stained glass windows and shine, making her stand out even from a distance. Emmy is briefly stunned that someone this beautiful exists in the world. The woman's eyes meet theirs, and she walks straight toward them. Vince swallows audibly. Even Emmy cannot help admiring the gracefulness of the woman's walk. When the woman steps out into the sunlight, she looks even more radiant, almost glowing. She leans forward, looking at Vince with brilliant golden eyes, the same shade as her hair, strikes a deliberately seductive pose, and calls out that they are the famous hero party rumored around here, and asks whether she might join them for a little while. Watching Vince's gaze drift between the woman's face and her cleavage, Emmy thinks, and is sure Janet thinks too, that there is no way Vince is going to say no. And in the same breath, she finds herself wondering what Russell is doing right now. Russell, with Sibylla at his side, walks south through the village, trading idle remarks. Sibylla declares it a perfect day for exploring. Russell tells her the weather does not matter because they are going inside a dungeon. Sibylla complains that walking home in the rain after a long day is the worst. He had been planning on picking up some armor after the weapons shop, but Sibylla had stopped him at the door. She had asked whether he meant to swap out the robe he was wearing, and told him he did not need to. He had asked why, since changing into something lighter would let him move more freely. He is currently wearing a white cloth robe trimmed with gold embroidery, something the party bought him after he received the saint job. Sibylla had explained that from her assessment, the robe was made of light, durable material and carried magic resistance, that it was good gear, and that he was safer keeping it on than swapping into some cheap, easy-to-move armor. He had asked if she really thought so. He had to admit the robe was expensive, but he could not picture swinging a sword in it. She had snickered at him and asked what was wrong with someone in a robe using a sword. He had pointed out that she herself was wearing light armor. She had told him she did not have a robe like his, so she made do. That if a robe were better, she would wear a robe. That if a staff were stronger, she would throw away her sword and beat enemies with a staff while kicking them in her boots. And that if a magic tool cast stronger spells, she would use that over her own magic. Russell, listening to her logic, had admitted she had a point. He had been stuck in an old mindset. Sword or staff, armor or robe. The choice of gear should not depend on a person's job. There are tendencies, of course, a swordsman naturally suiting a sword, but in the end, one picks what gives the best results. He had been quietly impressed by her flexible thinking. He had not, of course, said it out loud, because she would have gotten carried away. She had caught him anyway, and crowed that he must have been thinking she was cool, that he must have fallen for her. He had dropped a karate chop on her head without hesitation and walked on, ignoring her protests that he could be a little nicer to a girl. But that part of her, the part that let him stop being on guard around her, was the part he appreciated most. He looks up at the mountains to the south, raising a hand to block out the sun, and points out where the scarlet bat had come from. Sibylla agrees, pointing at the visible patch where trees had been heavily felled, and at the large hole in the bare slope at the center. Russell notes that a dungeon really has appeared here. Sibylla asks whether it has ever happened before. Given he was born here, he tells her he does not know, but for as long as he can remember, the village had been relatively peaceful. That, he thinks, is probably why the village cannot react in time to a dungeon appearing this suddenly. And because the dungeon is so new, no one from the city would come investigate an unknown one. Usually a dungeon has to be surveyed first to assess its danger level, and an unsurveyed dungeon is automatically treated as high danger. Beyond that, there is a real chance the dungeon has no treasure inside, meaning anyone who explores it eats the cost of supplies and camp setup for nothing. Unless one has money to burn, no one investigates a fresh dungeon. And there are plenty of dungeons in the world. Normally, a large guild near a new dungeon would put up an exploration request with a reward for completion, which would clarify the contents and make subsequent runs safer. The only guild in this village is the small, quiet one, run by the listless man at the desk. Russell tells Sibylla that they have no information at all, only that a housewife from the bean field was poisoned by one of the monsters, and that they will have to figure out the rest themselves. Sibylla says her arms are trembling with excitement. He asks whether she is not afraid at all. The words sound reckless to him. A clearly relaxed attitude toward an unknown dungeon when her level is not low, but is still naive, at level 8, in unknown terrain? Her answer surprises him. She tells him of course she is scared, that there is no way she is not, even in the easiest dungeon. If you die, it is over for you, and they do not even know what traps lie in wait. Especially in an unknown dungeon today, it is even more frightening. She adds, casually, that she is relieved because she has a healer with her, takes out a small shield from the back of her jacket, and walks into the dungeon. It occurs to Russell that he has always been going into dungeons with a powerful party. The vanguards of his old party had been among the best in the world, and barring overwhelming numbers, attacks rarely reached him. Sibylla, on the other hand, has always gone solo as a mage. He should have caught it when he saw her. Supposed to be a rear-line mage, carrying a melee weapon, she has gotten this far without a single comrade. People would surely have invited her to parties on her looks alone. He can easily picture her turning them down. Sibylla has been fighting alone all this time. That is why her sense of danger is calibrated differently from his, and in that sense, she is the senior in this party. Realizing that, he is reminded again that he himself is now alone. She is cheeky and bossy. She is a strange girl with an unknown background. But after spending this short time with her, he understands a few things about her, and he thinks she is not a bad person. She has wisdom and knowledge and real experience. He will give her credit where it is due, and call her out when she does or says something absurd. He whispers to her back that he will be counting on her from now on, Solo Senior, and follows her in. He is not a beginner at this. There is no way he is leaving the vanguard to a mage, no matter how Solo trained she is. He draws the sword he just bought and steps up beside her, telling her he will take the vanguard. She raises an eyebrow and asks if it is really fine for a healer to be up front. He tells her it would be more absurd to let an offensive mage take the front. She protests that common sense places a healer in the safest formation slot, but allows that, since he just bought a sword and all, if he wants to be in front, they could walk side by side and watch each other's backs, the dungeon being wide enough for it. He nods, and she falls in beside him. They descend the gently sloped tunnel, alert to their surroundings. The walls emit a magical light that wipes out any dark patches. This is not, he notes, an ordinary cave. They watch for side branches that could let monsters flank them. Sibylla soon points her sword at a faint shadow ahead and announces that there are monsters in the dungeon after all. He identifies it as a goblin. Sibylla declares cheerfully that the standard dungeon monster has appeared. Here she goes, and puts out her left hand. A fireball flies from it. He registers, surprised, that she did not chant. The goblin shrieks. The fireball strikes it square in the face, and it stops moving. He asks what that was. Sibylla tells him it was chantless magic, and asks whether he has really never seen it before. She explains that one has to concentrate hard, that it cannot be done with high-level magic one has just learned, and that it is a trick only those who know about it can pull off. He says, impressed, that she can do something like that. In his old party, they had never been in enough of a pinch to need it. The sage, Janet, with her abundant magic power, had always been the first to throw down powerful spells from a distance. Sibylla teases him, asking whether he is jealous because she can use cool, offensive magic. He admits, lightly, that he is. She turns serious and asks whether he desires power. He asks what she is talking about so suddenly. She asks again, head perfectly straight, whether he desires overwhelming power to defeat monsters. He starts to wonder sourly whether she is in some suspicious cult after all. She keeps going. He readies a karate chop with his free left hand. A little closer and her head will be in just the right place. Maybe this time he will leave an actual lump. Then she asks in a low, intent voice whether he desires the power to take revenge, to settle grudges. For a moment, he cannot react. Revenge? He does not want to think about it. He had been trying not to think about it, but in truth, he had never stopped thinking about it. Her face is now very close to his. Does he want a power like that? She had asked. Of course he wants it. The despair of being useless in his old party. His childhood friends growing up beside him, doing the same things, and ending up with stronger gifts. An overwhelming power. The power to attack and to break enemies. If only he had it. A power so strong that he could not only stand against the hero Vince, but beat him. Sibylla, he thinks. Are you? Then she asks in the same intent voice whether he wants a dried squid, because she is really craving one right now. He drops a karate chop on her head as hard as he can. The tension snaps. He feels like a complete idiot for having taken her seriously and for letting her dredge up that wound. He makes a private note never to take this girl seriously again. Still, chantless magic. He asks her if that means he could also use his spells without chanting. She rubs her head and answers that for heal at least, even he should manage. That she has no idea how saints work, but he must have learned heal at level 3. He tells her he learned it at level 1. Sibylla, who had been crouched to cut off the dead goblin's purple ears, stops dead and turns to look at him. She repeats it back to him, that he learned heal at level 1. He says, is that not normal in the priest tree? Otherwise the job would be useless. She tells him the fireball she used was something she had learned at level 2, and that she had never heard of anyone able to take advantage of their job's abilities at level 1. He says, "Is that so?" He has no one to compare his job to. Maybe Janet, since they are the same magic type, but that is still a stretch. And sages can use magic from level 1, so not really. Sibylla brushes the question aside, remarks that, so this is what a saint is? Suggests they move on, drops the goblin's ear into her bag, and starts walking. A few steps later, another monster appears. It is hard to see because the figure is solid black, but its weapon glints with light, which gives away its position. Looking closer, he sees it is the same shape as the goblin from before. He mutters that it is a black variant, and that this dungeon is starting to feel harder than expected. Sibylla asks whether the variant is strong. He confirms it is significantly stronger than the regular kind, and tells her she should get serious. He repositions his sword. Sibylla puts out her left hand and calls out "Fire Arrow," sending an arrow of flame straight at the black goblin. He was sure it would land, but the black goblin dodges and shoots towards Sibylla at high speed, a small knife in its hand glinting. He shouts her name and stabs the goblin from the side, his sword going straight through its throat, dropping it in one. It has been a long time since he last fought with a sword, but he is adapting quickly to this new blade. There is no time to enjoy the feeling. Sibylla curses, telling him it got her. She frowns down at the wound. Red is running from her white thigh. The cut is deep. Her relaxed expression from a moment ago is gone. He needs to heal her quickly. He decides he will use this as a chance to practice chantless casting too, since chantless healing in combat would be invaluable. He recalls the sensation of the spell and silently invokes heal, and the red on her thigh disappears at once. Sibylla strokes her thigh once and looks at him with wide eyes. She tells him he just used it, didn't he? That she had thought the cut was pretty deep, but he had closed it in a split second. As expected of the great saint, she tells him, "Thank you." He says, "Sure." She tells him then that they cannot explore any further than this. He asks why, since she is not injured. She points a toe at the black goblin's knife. It was poisoned, she explains. Even though her wound is healed, her condition could drop drastically at any moment. She had brought an antidote, but with a black variant suddenly turning up like this, even after healing the wound, it would be tough going. So this, Russell realizes, is the same kind of monster that poisoned Brenda's mother. Brenda's mother had chased one away from the dungeon and been bedridden for days afterward. He is, in retrospect, impressed she even managed to drive it off. Maybe she is stronger than she looks. In that case, he thinks, and silently invokes Cure, casting it chantless on Sibylla. Sibylla tilts her head as if she has noticed something, then opens and closes her hands and tests her legs, checking her body. She mutters his name in growing disbelief. That just now? To her. He tells her, casual, that he had told her earlier about the housewife from the bean field, that he had cured her yesterday with Cure, and that he had used the same spell on Sibylla just now, only without chanting, on the assumption that it was the same poison, and apparently it worked. Sibylla's eyes and mouth open wide. He thinks this is the most surprised he has seen her. She repeats in a small voice, "Cure." And chantless. At level 5! He confirms it. She asks when he learned it. He tells her, at level 2. Sibylla pauses as if doing arithmetic, then exhales a deep sigh. She tells him that for now she will say thank you, and that she is really glad she partied up with him. He says he thinks she has been helping him too, so the feeling is mutual. She asks, as a joke, whether he has fallen for her. He asks whether she wants another chop. She is clearly about to push the bit further, but he lets it go for now and walks ahead. She is saying something behind him, but having learned there is no point taking her seriously, he ignores her and keeps walking. Their dungeon run is, he wants to say, going well. He calls out that there are 2 black monsters ahead. Sibylla calls back that she will take the one on the right. He confirms. The enemies they are running into are without exception strong. So far it has been mostly black goblins, with the one purple goblin at the beginning. They are handling it, but if the upper levels are already this thick with the black variants, this dungeon is going to be brutal to clear. He sidesteps a leaping goblin holding a club and cuts it down before its attack reaches him. The color variants are stronger than ordinary goblins, but the height difference still forces them to jump at his head, and since they cannot correct their posture mid-air, it is easier to drop them at the apex of the leap when their movement is committed. After each kill, he checks on Sibylla. She has gotten cautious since the poisoned knife. She blocks attacks with the shield on her forearm, fends them off with her short sword, and fires chantless fireballs to finish them. The black goblins hit hard though, and after each kill, she clutches her shield arm with a pained look. She complains that the small bastards pack a punch. Russell thinks she should not be talking like that, although she would not listen, and her mouth honestly suits the language. He silently invokes heal on her from a distance, then a second heal, and decides he will keep healing her at the first sign of any wound while resting his own stamina. She blurts out that he just, and then is interrupted by him calling out that the next one is coming. She swears, confirms it, and engages. It is a knife-wielding goblin again, 3 of them, so he decides to attack first to avoid being surrounded. They shriek, and he lands hits before they can react. They are, evidently, weak against sudden attacks. He thinks again that the steel sword was money well spent. After cutting down 2, he turns to the last black goblin, which is now wary because of his opening rush. The black goblin swings its poison-coated knife at him. He thinks regretfully that he should have brought a shield too, like Sibylla, but standing still gets them nowhere. He steps forward and thrusts, and the goblin suddenly throws the knife at him, prepared to trade lives. As his sword pierces the goblin's throat, a voice resounds in his head, announcing that the Saint has reached level 6 and learned Wind Barrier. It is the familiar level-up notification that always arrives at exactly the wrong moment, but he files it away and stays on the present. He stops the thrown knife with his left palm, although the blade still stings a little, and at the same time gets a bad feeling in his body, the slack sensation of being slightly sleep-deprived. The poison, he realizes. Left untreated, it will get worse. Sibylla, who has just finished her own goblins, looks at him. Her wrist is bleeding above the line of her shield, hers having also thrown its knife at her. She stares at his bleeding palm with a surprised expression while holding her wrist. He wonders why she is making that face when she was also hit. He silently casts Cure and then Heal on both of them. The dragging tiredness leaves his body. Chantless casting really is more convenient than chanting once one gets used to it. Sibylla looks at his palm with one eyebrow raised, then back at her own wrist, clenches her fist a few times, and tilts her head. He decides not to worry about it. There is something he wants to test. He invokes Wind Barrier by name, and a colorless but faintly visible layer forms around him. Sibylla, mouth wide open, points at him and stutters is that Wind Barrier? He asks if she knows it. She tells him it is a spell that can block arrows, that it can repel some other magic, and that weak monsters have a hard time entering through it. But party members can move freely in and out, like this. She reaches her gloved fingers into the layer, confirms there is no resistance, and waves her palm in and out. There, she tells him. Russell thinks that will make dealing with the black goblins easier. He should be able to avoid a direct hit from a thrown knife now. If he had had this spell back in the old party, maybe he could have… No, he realizes. Even with this spell, it would not have changed much. But in the present situation, it is something to be grateful for, because now he does not have to worry about attacks from behind, given the black goblins have begun throwing their knives. Pleased with himself, he notices Sibylla looking at him with half-lidded eyes, arms crossed. He wonders what the look is for. She tells him, dryly, that if he could use a spell like that, he should have used it earlier. He answers that he just learned it at level 6, and that the black goblins are giving generous experience. She repeats it back to him, that he just learned it, and notes that he had said he was level 5. Then she groans, crosses her arms again, holds her head, and starts counting on her fingers as if checking something. She asks whether he has learned the spell Clean. He says no, he does not know that one. Refresh? She asks. He does not know that either. Stamina Charge. He has never heard of it. He wonders what these are. Is she trying to point out some hidden flaw in the Saint job? She breathes out and asks about Extra Heal. He tells her, that one he learned at level 4, and calls it out by name on the burnt black goblin Sibylla had killed with her fireball. The spell does not raise the dead, so the corpse stays a corpse, but every burn and wound on its body closes up. Sibylla bursts out, telling him to wait, that she had not told him to use it right then and there. What a waste! Has no one ever taught him to conserve mana? He tells her, dry, that this is a dungeon. Do not shout for every little thing, that healing magic uses very little mana, and that he can throw it around as much as he wants. She asks then how many times he can use it. He tells her he is sure he can use it 100 times, but he has never tested past that. He does not know the exact number, but probably not that much. Hearing this, Sibylla backs away, with the expression of someone who has just seen a monster. Russell thinks she really ought to fix that habit of letting her inner thoughts onto her face, or she is going to get into trouble somewhere someday. She asks him, finally, why he is going alone. He has skillful swordsmanship, and he can cast healing magic in continuous, chantless bursts, and the run is going easier and better than she had expected because of it. But in spite of that, why is he solo? He tells her, flat, that he was kicked out for being useless in his party. She tells him he is kidding. He walks away in silence. She calls out for him to wait. He stops without turning around and tells her that on the royal road the protagonist walks, a guy whose only spells fire when someone is already hurt is useless. And that was that. He keeps walking. He hears her catch her breath, but she does not call out again. That is right, he thinks. No matter where he goes, he is nothing but a healer mage. And today is the first step in breaking the chains that have been holding him in place. The hand that grips this sword still remembers the boy who had once dreamed of being a hero. By accepting that he is not the main character, by breaking out of that shell, he thinks he has finally seen what was missing from him. He is someone who can fight well enough with his own skill. He is finally beginning to understand himself. He glances at Sibylla, who has come up alongside him before he noticed. She asks what. He tells her it is nothing, that he was thinking they should explore a little farther, and asks whether she is all right with that. She tells him sure, since she found out they do not have to worry about him running out of mana. With a shrug and a smile, she walks ahead. The two of them are strangely natural with each other, like partners who have worked together for years, even though he met this strange girl only yesterday. His time, which has felt frozen for so long. His existence, which he had always cast as a supporting role. He has no reason or proof for it, but he has a feeling that if he is with this girl, he can break away from all of those thoughts. The narrator cuts back to Emmy. The mysterious, beautiful woman with what looks like a golden aura around her has just asked to join them, and Vince accepts on the spot, without a moment's thought. She slides up to Vince's side with a smile so dazzling that even Emmy, looking at her as a woman, feels almost blinded. As soon as the woman is settled beside him, Vince's eyes start crawling over her, the same way they had crawled over Janet earlier, lingering on the obvious. Emmy thinks to herself dryly that those things really are enormous, and wonders what the woman eats to grow them. Janet drops back to walk next to Emmy and gives her a wordless, exasperated little shrug. The kind that means she cannot deal with this man right now. Even with her usual flat face, Janet looks more closed off than usual, and Emmy reads it as the "I do not want to think about it" expression. The woman in front turns around and beams at them, apologizing again for the trouble and then guessing at their jobs out loud, naming Vince as the hero and Janet as the mage from the look of her, and concluding that Emmy must be the holy knight. Emmy startles and confirms it. The woman tells her with real warmth that she has always thought a girl who holds a shield to protect everyone is wonderful, and that she has always wanted to talk to a holy knight up close because they look so cool. Emmy stammers a thank you and feels her face heat. The woman coos that there are plenty of holy knights who lean on their rank and act overbearing, and that this is the first time she has seen one blush. Emmy ducks her head and tells herself this has to be some kind of reverse pickup, then immediately feels bad for thinking that about someone she has just met. The woman claps her hands as if remembering something and apologizes for her manners, introducing herself as Katie and saying it is a pleasure to meet them. She tilts her head with a graceful smile that Emmy registers as the kind of gesture only a real beauty pulls off. and notes privately that Katie has a bright, open warmth a tomboy like her and a bookworm like Janet do not have. Vince introduces himself and the other two with a familiar lilt, dropping the polite distance and calling her Katie at once. Janet only says her own name and corrects Katie's guess, telling her she is the sage and can also use healing magic. Katie apologizes for the slip, and Janet says she does not mind, but Emmy catches the small note of irritation in it. Then Vince, already drifting too close, tries to put his arm around Katie's shoulders. Emmy thinks to herself that being the hero is the only reason he gets away with this, and that as the woman in the same party, she is the one who ends up embarrassed by it. Vince announces expansively that the first thing they should do is treat Katie to a meal, that they can afford one more person, and Katie laughs and accepts. Emmy bites down on the comment she wants to make, that this is not exactly something to say in front of Katie when they have just thrown out a childhood friend for the very same kind of crowding. From the outside, they already look like Vince's harem, and a wave of nausea hits her at the thought that maybe this exact dynamic is the real reason Vince kicked Russell out. She talks herself out of it almost as quickly. They have been together since they were children. There is no way he would do something so petty. There cannot be. Vince leads them to one of the most expensive restaurants in town. Emmy can feel the stares of men around them as they walk in, equal parts dazzled by Katie and resentful of the man who has her. And she thinks, sourly, that to an outsider, they really do look like Vince's collection. The waiter takes their orders. Emmy snaps back to attention only when he is standing at her elbow, and embarrassed at how badly she has been spacing out, she stammers a request for the A-course. Katie is watching her with a smile that says she has been enjoying the show, and Emmy wants to crawl under the table. Once the dishes start arriving in their secluded corner of the restaurant, Emmy decides to take the lead and asks Katie what she would like to hear about. Katie tells her she has been wondering what kind of work the hero party has been doing and how far they have gotten. Then adds quickly that she is not some suspicious person collecting information, she is just a mage at level 10, and shows her adventurer tag to prove it. The tag identifies her as Katie, resident of the city of Hammond, mage, level 10. Emmy apologizes for the way her question must have come across, and Katie waves it off cheerfully, saying she is glad Emmy is the kind of girl who does not trust strangers without checking. Emmy thinks to herself that Katie is not only beautiful enough to make a woman jealous, she also seems genuinely kind, and that her smile is too bright a thing to be aimed at someone like Emmy, who got her childhood friend kicked out of the party only yesterday. Vince swallows the rest of his soup in a single long pull and leans across the table toward Katie. He tells her, with full chest, that they have been exploring dungeons for around half a year, and have just reached the 8th floor of the dungeon in Hammond. Katie's eyes go wide, and she asks whether they are already fighting Tauruses on that floor. Vince confirms it and credits Emmy specifically, telling Katie that Emmy was the one who blocked the Taurus's attack head-on. Katie turns shining eyes on her, and Emmy answers, fumbling, that her Holy Knight is at level 23, and she had braced the shield in both hands, so it had only hurt a little. Katie tells her that is amazing, that she hopes more women like Emmy who can stand in the vanguard alongside the men will start appearing, because girls coming up behind them will need someone to look up to. Emmy laughs the praise off and thinks, with a quiet ache, that she is not fit to be looked up to. She remembers the cut on her arm, the worry on the others' faces, and tells herself that if her only job was to protect everyone, she should not have been getting hurt in the first place. She was given one of the highest-ranking jobs in the world, a job meant to carry a party toward the deepest floors of any dungeon. She has not been at this job long, but still, struggling against middle-floor monsters is unacceptable. She tells herself plainly that she is weak. Then Katie sets down her fork on the fish dish, looks at each of them in turn, tilts her head, and asks the question that lands like a hand around Emmy's throat. She asks why a hero party has no priest in it. Just thinking the words priest and healer makes it hard for Emmy to breathe. Before Janet can answer, Vince barges in cheerfully, telling Katie that the hero, the Holy Knight, and the Sage can all cast healing magic, so a healer is useless in their party. Emmy turns her face away so he cannot see her frowning. Janet's expression does not move. Emmy braces herself for Katie to fall in with Vince, to say lightly that then they really do not need one, and she knows that if Katie does, she may not be able to keep her mouth shut. Katie does not, though. She stabs her fork down into the fish, and tells Vince that that is a very convenient way of thinking. Emmy blinks. The reaction is so much smaller than she had braced for. Katie lifts the bite to her mouth with an indifferent expression and remarks on how delicious the food in this restaurant is, as if a hero party's entire job composition were less interesting than a piece of grilled fish. Compared with how delighted she had been over their dungeon progress a moment ago, the disinterest is glaring, and it flips a switch in Vince, who raises his voice. He insists that the three of them are practically healers themselves, that they do not need any so-called saint, no, priest, in the party, that useless healers who cannot even attack are dead weight and a waste of supplies. Emmy hisses at him that the other tables are watching, and Vince clicks his tongue, mutters an apology, and sits down. Emmy cannot look at him after that. She thinks, with a sinking feeling, that he had been about to say saint, that every word he spat out was aimed at Russell. Beside her, Janet picks a piece of fish up from the table edge and lays it back on her plate without expression. Janet does not drop her food. Apparently, even Janet is not as composed as she looks. Katie clears her throat and asks, almost shyly, whether the sage, Janet, has learned Cure. Janet tells her she learned it at level 15, and that she is at level 26 now. Katie nods at the numbers and asks, as if it were small talk, about Fireball. Janet says she has had Fireball since level 1. Katie says she suspected as much, since Janet is the pinnacle of mages, the sage. Emmy catches a phrase she has never heard. She asks what Katie means by semi-sorcerer sage. Katie, surprised that she does not know, explains that a sage is a job that can use both priest and mage abilities, and that it might be more accurate to call a sage the in-between of a saint and a sorcerer, with a saint being the pinnacle of priest, and a sorcerer being the pinnacle of mage. The sage sits between them, leaning further toward the sorcerer side in Janet's case, since she had Fireball from level 1, while a normal mage only learns it at level 2. Katie tells Janet that her sage is an excellent job, almost as strong as a sorcerer in offense, with healing magic on top, even if her healing is not on the level of a true priest. The word excellent should have soothed something in Emmy, but instead, a quiet alarm starts in the back of her head. Sage is not a stand-in for priest. Sage is, when it comes to healing, lower than a priest. Janet, evidently following the same thought, asks Katie at what level a priest learns Cure. Katie tells her at level 10, that priests who are the dedicated healing job are rare to begin with and slow to gain levels, but that once they reach level 10, their lives get markedly easier, because Cure costs a lot of mana to cast, and priests can make a stable living going city to city accepting donations for it. She adds, almost as an afterthought, that of course there are also priests who prefer to keep adventuring. Vince insists, doggedly, that none of this changes anything because all three of them can cast healing magic. Katie does not contradict him. Exactly. Only praises them again, telling them it is amazing that all three can do it. The praise lands so empty that Emmy can hear it for what it is. She can feel the dark clouds settling over the whole party, an unease she cannot put into words. They have just been told that sorcerer is the counterpart of Saintess, and that a priest is better at healing than a semi-sorcerer sage, which means the saint, the counterpart of the Saintess, is something they have not yet measured at all. Emmy is too afraid to ask, and in the end does not ask. Back in the dungeon under the village, things have been going better than Russell had expected. With wind barrier in place, the Black Goblin's thrown knives stop being a threat. Even sudden ambushes get cushioned long enough for the two of them to counter, and Russell finds it strange how much lighter his shoulders feel when he is not constantly bracing for an attack from his blind side. The barrier is wide enough to hold 4 people, so with just him and Sibylla inside, there is room to move around, and Sibylla stays inside it even when he has to shift position. That makes it easier for him to read her injuries the moment they happen, because every time she takes a hit, she lets out a small pained sound through her teeth, and he just casts Heal or Cure without bothering to look. Extra Heal, which costs him almost nothing to throw, is sitting on the shelf only because she keeps asking him to conserve, but he has no idea why he should bother conserving anything. They have cut down a fair number of goblins by now, and Russell is starting to think they have cleaned out a stretch of the floor, when another group of black goblins comes around a bend, this time with one of the scarlet dungeon bats trailing behind them. The 2 goblins step to the side, weapons raised, to let the bat make the first move. Russell mutters that they have not even found a staircase down yet, and the bats are already on this floor, which is more troublesome than he had hoped, because if these monsters are not cleared out, the orphanage children will not be safe outside. Sibylla raises her shield in front of her and agrees that the way the bats are leaving the dungeon at all is unnatural, that if they clean out everything on the upper floor, the children and Gemma will at least be safe for the time being. Russell tells her then they will do it thoroughly, and she tells him not to let a single one escape. The whole pack attacks at once, with no coordination to speak of. Sibylla guards with her shield and fires off chantless fireballs, complaining that the black goblins are surprisingly cocky for goblins. Then without warning, she calls out Fire Javelin, and a sharper, harder spell than any of her usual ones lances cleanly through the bat's chest. Russell jumps on the goblin frozen by the spectacle and takes its head off. The last one throws its knife and bolts, but a red line spears it through the heart before it gets far. That was a fire arrow. Russell turns on Sibylla and asks flat whether she has been able to cast Fire Arrow Chantless this whole time, because if so, she could have been using it sooner. And if she had used Fire Javelin from the start, the bat would never have been a problem. Sibylla grins and puffs out her chest, telling him that just as he leveled up earlier, she leveled up too, and that what he just saw was the power of a level 10 mage. Russell admits, internally, that if he is climbing levels in this dungeon, then of course she is climbing levels too. He grumbles, mildly frustrated, that he is still at level 6 while she has gone up by 2. Sibylla tells him, with the air of someone explaining something obvious, that she has offensive magic and is dealing the most damage, so naturally she gains the most. Russell thinks about it and concedes the point. Even in the old party, the level order had been Vince first, then Janet, then Emmy, then him, last by a wide margin. Emmy, despite being a vanguard with a sword, was a defense-built holy knight, and ended up lower than Janet, who had been in the rear flinging high-grade magic from distance. The same logic explains why a mage in the rear is outpacing the healer in the rear. It is just how the math works. Then, Sibylla turns suddenly hesitant, looks up at him with an apologetic angle of the head, and tells him, half mumbling, that she knows priests are rare, and that the standard etiquette is to nurture a priest from early on, so they can catch up to the rest of the party. But he is so strong on his own that she keeps forgetting his job needs that kind of leeway, and she has been getting carried away. Russell stares at her. The truth, he realizes, is that someone with a common job like mage should have been letting him land the killing blows. She is apologizing for not doing that. He tells her quietly that there is no need to apologize, that it is not her fault, that all he wants is for her to keep thinking he is strong, and that it falls on him if he cannot make the killing blow himself. He adds, dry, that this kind of meek apology does not suit her at all, that cheeky and smug is more her speed. Sibylla turns her face away in surprise, closes her eyes for a moment, as if folding the comment in, then lets out a long breath and snaps right back to her usual self, crossing her arms and shrugging with a grin. Russell thinks privately, with relief, that yes, this is the Sibylla who fits. She tells him fine. In that case, she will go all out the way she has always done, and he tells her that is fine by him. Then he tells her, casually, that she has been clutching the goblin's severed ear while crossing her arms, and her jacket now has blood smeared on it. She lets out a strangled screech and stares down at herself with horrified eyes, and Russell cannot stop a small laugh from slipping out as he watches her dab at the stain with tears welling up. A few seconds later, the realization lands on him quietly. He thinks to himself that he is not sure when the last time was that he laughed from the bottom of his chest like that, and that it occurred to him only now that he had stopped laughing well before he was thrown out of the hero party, that his head had been too full of dread to allow it. He keeps the thought to himself, because if Sibylla catches it, she will get insufferable, and he gives her a flat, non-committal reply when she asks what is on his face. Sibylla tilts her head, loses interest immediately, and starts dismantling and grilling the bat for lunch. He thinks again that he still does not understand why a mage as competent and oddly likable as her goes solo. But as long as she is willing to work with him this hard, he will gladly take it, and he intends to cooperate with her until the threat to the village is cleared. She sits on the floor of the dungeon with her legs spread wide and bites into the grilled bat meat, declaring that meat really is the best. The image, somehow, suits her completely. They have only salt for seasoning, but it still turns out good. Sibylla calls it a godsend, since she had been bracing herself for the awful, overpriced, dried food adventurers usually rely on, and offers him a share. Russell asks her if the subjugation proof for the bat is the fang, and she remembers something and pulls a fang out of her bag, tossing it to him. When he catches it, he realizes it is already dry, and remembers it is from the bat he killed at the orphanage door last night, the one she had been dismantling and cooking from this morning. He tells her dryly that he has apparently been forgetful lately, and she suggests they keep their drops separate to keep accounting simple. Russell agrees, then notices her watching him, grinning. She declares herself a nice girl, and Russell agrees deadpan. She crows, asking whether that means he has fallen for her, and Russell ignores it and asks her instead why she keeps going solo when she so clearly has the ability and personality to either join an existing party or build her own. Almost no one knows anything about her past her face, and that strikes him as strange. Sibylla's smile fades, and she looks away. She asks him if he really wants to ask, and he tells her he has already shared his own story, and that if she does not want to share hers, it is fine. She tells him in that case, it is a secret. Then she sighs, gives in, and tells him that the reason is not anything heavy, that she has been looking for a healer, but none of the men who keep approaching her are anywhere near a fit. He asks whether she is sure it is not a coincidence, that priests cannot be that rare in the city. Sibylla tells him she has explained this already, that priests are rare, and that the goddess hands out jobs based on personality, and that for someone who happens to be the most beautiful woman in the world, like her, every man who approaches her is a beast staring at her chest and backside, which is not what she needs in a priest. Russell notes dryly that she has just brazenly called herself the most beautiful woman in the world, and admits, sourly, that her face does in fact justify the claim, which is irritating to acknowledge. Then he catches the phrasing he has been waiting for. She said that, "goddess," with a tone that does not soften. He thinks again that compared to ordinary people, Sibylla has very little patience for the goddess religion, which fits with the way she opened their first conversation and her interest in his answer. Sibylla brushes the whole subject off with a curt, that it does not matter anymore, and Russell lets it lie, observing internally that he does not have much faith in the goddess either, and the two of them could form a faithless party at this rate. They head off to the next stretch of corridor. After several more kills, he levels up again, and Sibylla congratulates him on the new spell. He calls it out by name as Extra Heal Link. The familiar Extra Heal activates, but the casting form covers everyone he counts as an ally. The spell named exactly what it does, applying Extra Heal to the whole party at once. He calls it Plain, and Sibylla snaps at him not to call it Plain, with such volume that he flinches. She demands to know whether he understands what he has just learned, that it is a game-changing piece of magic, that party-wide Extra Heal is the ideal form of healing for a 4-person team that cannot keep up with the damage they take on the middle floors. Then she asks, almost in afterthought, whether he can use Heal Link. Russell tells her he learned Heal Link at level 3, and notes that for a party that needs healing every turn, it is the more efficient choice, so he will use it next time. Sibylla cuts him off, telling him that Heal Link is only efficient for a party of 4 or more. Russell tells her he never runs out of mana with healing magic, and she clutches her head and groans that she keeps forgetting he is that kind of guy. Sibylla mutters that this is going to get more interesting later. Russell catches the word later and asks whether she will teach him what spells he might pick up next, since she clearly knows healing magic inside and out. Sibylla startles and stammers, and finally tries to cover by saying she only meant that exploration was going to get more interesting. Russell calls her on it, asking whether she does not know what spells he might gain. Sibylla pauses and tells him she suspects he has learned all of them, that the only one she can think of that he might not have is Cure Link. Her words land on Russell like a hammer to the skull. Party-wide heal, party-wide cure, a windshield that turns aside arrows, and that is all. Even if he had stayed in the hero party, no matter how hard he had tried, that is the entire ceiling of his abilities. He asks her, quietly, whether there is no strengthening magic in his tree, nothing that could put offensive buffs on a weapon. Sibylla tells him weapon enchantment belongs to magic swordsmen and sword saints, that body strengthening is a mage's territory, and that dedicated healing jobs do not have the time to also learn offensive magic. He asks then about more advanced defensive magic, since he already has Wind Barrier, and there must be something more there. Sibylla names 2 spells, Protection and Magic Coating, which she calls the highest defensive magic, a layer of mana around the body that turns aside physical and magical attacks respectively. She adds that Wind Barrier is the odd one out, and is only learnable by veteran priests at level 25. Russell wishes aloud that he could learn Protection and Magic Coating, his voice coming out before he can stop it, because when he hears the word defense, he sees Emmy taking a wound for him all over again. He knows there is no point reaching for any of it now, but he wanted a sliver of hope that his job could let him be useful in the worst moments. Sibylla answers him bluntly, telling him it is impossible, that only a holy knight can learn either of those 2 spells. They keep working through the first floor after that. The silence between them is awkward at the edges, and Russell catches it on her profile, even though she keeps cutting down monsters at the same steady rate. She is, evidently, sitting on a hefty mana pool too, since she has shown no sign of running out. He memorizes the branches as they go. Then he tells her, in a flat voice with no warm-up, that he has hit level 8, that he just learned it, and he calls out Cure Link. His body glows for a moment, and a gust of wind sweeps through both of them. Nothing changes, since neither of them has been poisoned. He looks at his own hands and remarks, with a small bitter smile, that this one is plain too. Sibylla is pointing at him with her mouth open. She breathes that she cannot believe Cure Link actually exists, and tells him fiercely that party-wide healing of injuries and party-wide cure of status conditions in the same toolkit is enough to turn the tide of a battle, and that Pure Cure, the highest grade cure for status conditions, cast on multiple people at once, is the kind of spell that decides wars. Russell catches the phrase Pure Cure and asks her what she means. Sibylla explains that priests learn a stack of partial cures along the way. Palsy Cure for paralysis, Hypno Cure for hypnosis, Poison Cure for poison, and finally Pure Cure that handles all of it, a wall most healing mages have to grind their way to at level 10, the moment they earn the right to receive donations and live off the spell. Russell ticks through his own list and asks her what about stamina charge then. Sibylla tells him that heal and cure are already covering that for him, that mages walking on bad dungeon footing all day should be wrecking their feet, and asks whether he has noticed any fatigue lately. He has not. Ever since he started spamming heal in passing, his stamina has held steady. Sibylla tells him in a serious voice that in some ways, the fact that he never tires in a long fight is stronger than any strengthening spell. He answers, more quiet than usual, that no one in his old party had ever noticed. Sibylla walks over to him and brings her open hand down on his back, hard enough to drive the breath out of him. He grunts, half-winded, and she tells him in a level voice that she understands how he feels, but that he should be more proud of his own abilities. Then she explains link spells in particular, that they apply to everyone he recognizes as an ally, and that even on upper floors where injuries are rare, it remains a tool he can use anywhere. He asks what she means by anywhere. She tells him, by way of example, that he could walk into a castle town hit by an epidemic and cure the whole town in a single cast as long as his mana held. She mentions that this is likely the origin of one of the legends of the Saintess, the Prayer to the Goddess chapter, where the legendary Saintess saved a village from a demon-infested miasma by praying to the goddess, was answered, and lay bedridden for days afterward. She adds with a faint, dry smile that her bet is the Saintess simply used Cure Link on the entire village in private, and was bedridden because her mana had given out. The bit about the goddess answering her prayer, Sibylla says, was a self-promoting cover-up, and the legendary Saintess was a fame-obsessed woman who kept the truth from her people. Russell follows the logic and concludes that if he learned Cure Link at level 8, then the former Saintess at a higher level would have been able to cast it chantless and hide the source completely. The image of the legendary Saintess collapses for him on the spot. He sighs and tells Sibylla, with a small lopsided smile, that she is right. He has just been shown the truth of his job, and there is no longer any reasonable way to keep complaining about it. The magic he carries, capable of unraveling a legend, is itself proof that he can stand beside the saintesses of myth, and he tells himself that the way he has been doubting and cursing his own blessing is petty. He turns to her and thanks her, for a lot of things. Sibylla immediately whistles that the tsundere has finally come clean, and that she is now 100% sure he has fallen for her. Russell drops a light chop on her head and tells her, dry, that he might have, if she had not opened her mouth and ruined it. She winces and pouts, and watching her sulk like a child who has bitten into something bitter, he notices the corner of his own mouth lifting on its own. He thinks, mildly, that he has gotten comfortable around her without noticing. He tells her they should keep going, and wipe out the whole upper floor while they are at it, and asks whether she still has mana to spare. She tells him plenty, more than him for sure. They press on. After a long sweep, they have mapped out the entire first floor, and standing in front of them at the end is a staircase down. Russell counts off 4 scarlet bats killed inside the dungeon, plus the one outside, and remarks that it is a small miracle the village has held together this long. Sibylla agrees that with that many bats leaking out, the curfew is the only reasonable response. Russell adds that with the upper floor cleaned, the orphanage children can play in the yard until nightfall again. Sibylla glances sideways at him and grins, observing that he is gentle with children. He tells her he can be nice to people who are not children too, and she counters that he could be a bit nicer to her, and he tells her he is already being plenty nice. They drop it there and head down the stairs. The moment they reach the second floor, both of them stop. The floor of the corridor is purple. The walls are unnaturally smooth, almost arranged. In front of them is a vast open space. Russell asks what this place even is. He has been told, like any working adventurer, that the first 5 floors of a dungeon have ordinary rock floors, that the 6th floor onward turns blue and marks the middle layer, and that monsters there are dangerous even to veteran teams. Sibylla murmurs, "No way. How?" in a half voice. Russell asks her if this is still the upper layer, and she does not answer, only stares ahead into the dark with cold sweat standing on her temple. He calls out her name louder. She finally tells him in a thin, pained voice that a dungeon is normally divided into upper, middle, and lower layers, that the middle layer floors are blue, the lower layer floors are red, and that purple, she tells him, is the lowest layer of all, called the demon world. She raises her shield. A soft footfall, then another. He turns his head toward the sound and sees the silhouette of a humanoid figure picked out in solid black, only the eyes glowing a faint red. The very sight of the thing scrapes the back of his neck. He asks whether that is even a monster. Then he asks Sibylla, sharper, what it is. The figure itself answers him, in a thick male voice that comes out muddled and hard to parse. It thanks them for showing up, telling them in a chatty tone that it had made the first floor as hard as it could and had not expected to be interrupted so soon, that it has only built out 3 floors and is embarrassed to receive guests in a half-finished room. Russell demands to know who it is. The figure brightens and welcomes them, announcing that it is the dungeon maker of this place, which it calls the Adria Dungeon. Russell repeats dungeon maker, baffled. Sibylla tells him quietly that it is not surprising he has never heard the term. He asks her if she knows it. She nods, eyes still on the figure, and tells him the lowest level of a dungeon is also called the Demon World, and the dungeon maker who rules such a place has another name. She tells him plainly that it is called the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord. Russell does not know exactly what manner of being is in front of them, but the word alone is enough for anyone to fill in. An overwhelmingly strong existence, the enemy of mankind, the wall the legendary heroes had to climb. He is being told that one of those things is standing in front of him, on the 2nd floor of a dungeon under his home village. The Demon Lord drawls that its guests look a little quiet, that it had expected more excitement on their part for having made it this far. Russell tells himself, internally, that there has to be a limit to how unexpected reality can get, that getting kicked out of a hero party because of his saint job and then bumping into the Demon Lord on the way out is a very bad joke. He decides quickly that picking a fight would be the worst possible move, that the Demon Lord clearly wants to talk, and that keeping it talking is safer than provoking it. He asks what its goal is. The Demon Lord brightens at the question and tells him cheerfully that humans are out trying to kill dungeon makers everywhere to keep monsters from spilling out. So the Demon Lords have decided to eliminate the most troublesome part of humanity. Russell catches the us in its phrasing and asks whether the Demon Lords share information with one another and what exactly it means by the most troublesome part. The Demon Lord chuckles, confirms that they originally came from the same place, and corrects itself, saying it is more accurate to call it a troublesome element. Russell goes cold. In Adria, the troublesome elements the Demon Lord might be talking about are very limited. He asks whether Adria village itself is the target. The Demon Lord congratulates him on full marks and tells him yes, that village in particular, and the orphanage in particular, looks delicious. Russell echoes the word orphanage. The Demon Lord explains, with relish, that according to its friend, the orphanage is something important to the Holy Knight who protects the hero. Russell understands at once that the thing in front of him is after the hero party, specifically Emmy, and through Emmy, the thing she cares most about, which is Gemma and the children. And the hero party means the Demon Lord is, by extension, after him as the saint. Russell asks whether the Holy Knight is really the right target, since the hero is the more dangerous figure. The Demon Lord tells him that heroes are more brittle than they look, both in body and in mind, and that there is a most important principle in this kind of strategy, and that since they have come this far, it will share. It explains, with detached professionalism, that ordinary monsters have no brains, but for a being like itself, it is easy to figure out how to break a hero party. The target, it tells him, is always the healer, so it has to take out the vanguard first, although it would be even more efficient to take out the Saintess at the start, since the party crumbles instantly without one. It catches itself, corrects itself to say priest in this case, and explains that crushing the Holy Knight's morale lets it eliminate the priest, then the sage after, that without a healer, humans collapse in long fights because they have no durability, and that this is the basic theory of dismantling a hero party. Russell feels a chill down his spine at how casually the Demon Lord is laying out the math. He had, he realizes, been carrying a child's image of a Demon Lord in his head, a brute that wins by force. The thing in front of him gathered information on the hero party ahead of time, understands human party composition and weaknesses, and plans to break the party's morale before swinging a single fist. It is patient and careful, even from a position of superior power, and that is the most dangerous kind of opponent. The Demon Lord has, however, missed one thing. It still does not know that he is the saint of the hero party, because in this generation, the Saintess role landed on a man and became saint. So no matter how long it waits, the Saintess it is hunting for does not exist in the form it is looking for. Russell asks, calmly, what the Demon Lord intends to do with them, since they are not the sort of party that can subdue a Demon Lord. He wants to avoid a direct fight if at all possible. The Demon Lord hums and tells him that since it has gone to the trouble of explaining all of that, it would be a waste to crush them itself, and that it still has things it wants to get on with. Russell catches Sibylla's quiet breath of relief and thinks privately that she too wants no part of a direct confrontation. Then the Demon Lord adds, lightly, that it may as well use the two of them as guinea pigs for an operation test. Light bursts up from the purple floor before Russell can react. The light gathers, grows, and resolves into an enormous creature, with flame crawling over its body. Sibylla drops to the ground next to him and breathes a name in a shaking voice. Fire Dragon. Russell asks what she said. She tells him, voice unsteady, that the thing in front of them is bad, that it is a fire dragon, that calling it a dragon is not quite right, that it is the highest species of salamander and one of the strongest fire attribute monsters in the demon world. Russell does not even have time to register that real dragons exist before the Demon Lord pronounces the manifestation a success, tells them it is going to go rest for a while, thanks them for the chat, and vanishes into the distance. Russell shouts at Sibylla to run. She tells him through grit teeth that they cannot, that the Demon Lord has just designated the fire dragon a floor boss and the stairs are sealed. He turns and sees a glowing wall blocking the way back, the same kind of magic surface as his wind barrier, and it does not budge. The fire dragon growls. Russell takes stock. He had been counting on getting out without a fight against the Demon Lord, and had thought that meant survival. Sibylla's magic is fireball, fire arrow, fire javelin, all fire attribute. Throwing fire at a fire element apex predator is the work of an idiot, and he has no intention of engaging head-on. He grabs Sibylla's hand and runs for a side path off the main chamber. The fire dragon's open mouth fills the space behind her face. He calls out Wind Barrier and silently casts it again on top of itself, reminding himself in the same breath to time the second cast right. The result is a barrier thick enough to turn the fire dragon's breath. The wind from the barrier flattens the burning oil and air of its breath against the floor. He has not seen wind cancel fire that hard before. Double casting, evidently, is unexpectedly powerful. He chains Heal Link on the two of them while they are still moving, in case the heat alone is taking a slow toll on their stamina, and Sibylla notices it at once. The fire dragon stays on the other side of the wall of flame, blinded by its own breath, and they slip into a narrow side corridor too small for its bulk to enter. Both of them breathe out as quietly as they can. Russell tells himself they are still alive only by luck. The situation, though, has not improved. The only staircase up is sealed, and he is certain the Demon Lord, careful as it has been, has sealed any other route. Defeating the fire dragon is the only way out, and that is a fight he should not be able to win. While he is still working it out, Sibylla turns and asks him, in the serious voice from before, whether he believes in the goddess. He tells her he has already given her his answer. He has nothing but contempt for a goddess, who handed him a job that left him helpless in moments like this one. Sibylla tells him, "Is that so?" and then asks, with great care, whether he desires power. Power. The word can mean many things, but in their current state, pinned in a side corridor with a fire element apex predator on the other side of a wind barrier, it can only mean one thing: the power to strike, the power to destroy, the power to kill. Russell looks back at her, straight into her eyes, and asks her a question of his own. He asks Sibylla who she really is. Watching the wall of flames still roaring outside the corridor, he figures they have time to talk. Sibylla awkwardly looks away. He goes over what he knows. Sibylla has been a tremendous help, with vast knowledge of dungeons and a flexible way of thinking that pulled him out of his shell, and she taught him a great deal about priest magic in particular. But on the topic of saint magic, she had been oddly thin. The way she had reacted to Cure Link suggests someone has been keeping the Saintess line of skills under wraps. Then there are the Demon Lords, an existence not recorded in any account of the hero parties of legend, although there is one old story of a group of adventurers, none of them in a hero party, who put down a demon king. He has had a suspicion forming. Maybe the heroes of legend deliberately kept the existence of the Demon Lord secret, since acknowledging the threat would have meant sharing credit for defeating it. He would never have entertained that thought before. But now that he knows the legendary Saintess hid the use of Cure Link for fame, and now that he sees the kind of person the goddess gave the hero job to, namely Vince, the picture is consistent. They chose their own glory over the survival of their people, which means humanity still does not know about demon lords or the demon world. And Sibylla knows all of it. He stays silent and watches her. Sibylla finally exhales a long sigh and tells him, in a small voice, that the truth is, she had been watching him back in Hammond, more specifically, watching every priest in the city. She tells him she had been looking for a kind-hearted healer carrying a grudge deep in his chest. And of all of them, he had been the one she was most interested in, although she had not realized at the time that he was a saint. Russell takes it in. So Sibylla has known him longer than he has known her, and she had memorized the priest skill list because she had been studying priests. He asks her why she still seems so thin on the saint skill list. She tells him she had never had a chance to get close to the Saintess of the previous generation, who had been beloved by her hero and carried no dark feeling for Sibylla to grip. That Saintess was a closed box. He asks her if their meeting at the orphanage had also been planned. She tells him no, that she had heard a dungeon scarlet bat was terrorizing the children and had come to help, and that when he, the priest she had been most interested in, was the one to save her, she had decided it was fate. He asks her what kind of fate. She tells him yes, fate, and then a pair of half-transparent black wings unfolds from her back. Russell goes still. Sibylla tells him she is a goddess. Not the same goddess the church worships, who is the sun goddess, but she tells him the Twilight Goddess. Russell repeats the title under his breath, taken aback. He has always thought her beauty was unreal, but he had not gone so far as to suspect she is literally a goddess. She offers him an alternative, suggesting that the followers of the sun goddess would probably find it easier to call her the evil god. He says, dry, so it was a cult invitation after all. She laughs, then snaps back to seriousness, and asks again whether he desires power. He stays quiet. She continues, asking him whether he, betrayed by his companions, does not want an overwhelming power that would surpass even the hero, the power to take revenge on them. He can tell from her voice this is not a joke. He asks her what kind of power she is talking about. She tells him it is dark magic, that she will convert his power into dark attribute offensive magic, that she has manifested in this world many times by passing her memories forward, looking for a priest she could turn into a Twilight sorcerer, and that if he will swear a Twilight pact with her, she will grant him dark magic, the ultimate offensive attribute. The word offensive lands in him like a key sliding into a lock. He asks her what she means by converting his power. He asks whether he would have to learn it from scratch. She tells him no, that he would have to sacrifice every priest spell he has learned, along with every drop of accumulated mana and every piece of knowledge tied to those spells, to learn dark magic in their place. He tells himself, in the quiet at the back of his head, that it would not be much of a price. He has been living with healing magic that no one ever needed. He thinks of Janet, the first beside him to learn heal, even though she is the offensive magic sage. He thinks of Emmy, who learned heal as a heavy armor vanguard with no need for it. He thinks of Vince, who got hero and trained the same way Russell did and still found time to pick up heal. Russell has lost count of how often he had wished he could trade his entire spell list for a single offensive spell. The ultimate offensive attribute, in exchange for healing magic he does not use, would be the trade of his life, and he will never see another offer like it. He looks at Sibylla and starts to open his mouth, and the image that lands on him at that exact moment is Brenda, the 4-year-old girl crouched alone at the side of the road, crying because her mother was sick. He tells Sibylla plainly that he cannot accept her offer. She blinks. Her face freezes. He realizes in the same breath that no matter how many times he is kicked or hated or thrown away, he is still not the sort of man who can walk past a crying child for his own gain. If the sun goddess foresaw all of this and still gave him the saint job, then she deserves every drop of his hatred. And he keeps that. But his answer here does not change. He tells Sibylla that if he loses his healing magic, he will no longer be able to help children like Brenda. And that is why he is saying no. Sibylla's eyes widen, then drop, then close.